Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and as we continue our interview series with the short list nominees for Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence, joining me today is Alice Bienia. Hi, Alice. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well, Eric. And how are you doing?
I'm doing good, too. It's nice and sunny outside. I hope it's the same in Calgary.
We're covered in smoke from the wildfires.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been through that, too. As a bio, Alice is a former geologist and management consultant turned crime writer. Her main protagonist, Jorja Knight, is a former forensic lab analyst turned PI. Night in the Museum, her fifth novel in the series, has been nominated for the Whodunit Award for Best Traditional Mystery, sponsored by Jane Doe. But it's not the first time that she's been shortlisted by the CWC. Her first book in the series, Night Blind, was an Arthur Ellis Award finalist for Best Unpublished First Crime Novel in 2016. And her, just last year, her third book in the series, Three Dog Night, was a finalist for the same category that she's been nominated for this year. So let's hopefully three times the charm.
Yeah, I'm hoping, Eric.
This is the second time we'll be chatting because I interviewed her for Three Dogs Night. I did want to ask the same questions. And last time we learned a little bit more about Alice and her former career. Also, we talked a bit about Calgary. I didn't want to repeat those questions. So if you're watching this on either Facebook or YouTube, in the description, I'll leave you a link to the previous video, and you can learn a little bit more about Alice that way, which lets us talk a little bit more about Jorja Knight this time. I hope you don't mind, Alice.
No, not at all.
So in Night at the Museum, it's approximately 1 year after the events of Three Dog Night. According to your words, Jorja Knight was sort of learning the ropes in the third book, learning new skills. Do you feel 1 year afterwards she's, or let's say, how does she feel about it? Does she feel like a pro yet?
I think she has finally got her feet underneath her, and she's had some interesting cases. She's also discovered that surveillance is like her worst nightmare. It's like pulling teeth. She hates it. This is why I developed in the book a character named Sal, this 60-ish woman who's kind of an eccentric, but she's really good at surveillance, and she wants to be a PI. So Jorja hands off a lot of her surveillance to her as a in a subcontract. So yeah, and she's looking for more involved cases, I guess. Between Three Dog Night and this one, she actually took on a case in Night Vision where she's trying to prevent a murder, because that kind of appealed to her. This psychic comes to her and says, hey, I've had these visions and I think I'm going to be killed. And so Jorja, this is the kind of thing that would appeal to Jorja, right? She's like, oh, well, that's different. That's a bit of a challenge. So yeah, sign me up. And so yeah, she has grown and she's getting a little more comfortable in, maneuvering her way, through the PI world. And so a lot of her cases now are starting to get a little more complicated.
You also said in the third book she was starting a relationship with DI Louise Azagora. Right. In your words, it's in the years past, it's an on again, off again relationship that was mostly off.
Right.
So other than that, how is the relationship coming along?
So by the time we get to Night in the Museum, she's kind of, her and Lewis have kind of solidified this. They're definitely in a relationship. It's not a platonic relationship. Jorja hopes that it's a committed relationship, but she's not entirely sure. And she's not confident enough in that relationship to make any demands of him. So right now she's sort of, enjoying the relationship, trying to get to understand him a little better. He's very career driven. And in a way that works for Jorja because, they don't question each other's need to be out at 10 or 11 at night doing, stuff. So it works in that way, but he's very emotionally closed, and in reality, Jorja is too. So in a way, they're kind of similar in that respect. but they're doing the dance and trying to figure out if we can make this work.
In the last book, you said she had the hots for him, but they were sort of antagonistic for each other too, as you would expect, sort of with a PI cop relationship. Is that still an issue that they're dealing with?
Unfortunately, yes, because you know, he's a lieutenant. He's got aspirations to maybe go into politics someday. You know, he looks at Jorja and he goes, you know, is a PI partner, you know, really the kind of partner that wants to go to these social events with me, et cetera, et cetera. And then also, you know, because he is a cop and heads up a department in the police service, you know, cops and PIs don't often have a lot of respect for each other. You know, they can have a good working relationship, and Jorja tries to have a really good relationship with the police, but, you know, they can be seen as interfering or interfering with an investigation, you know, sticking their nose in where they shouldn't. And so there's that ongoing conflict, you know, between the two of them. And I think Azagora, you know, secretly wishes she would do something else. And but he's not about to ask her, at least not yet.
The first line of your blurb says that PI Jorja Knight knows firsthand what it's like to be tormented by lingering questions after the death of a loved one. I'm assuming in the reference to her pain is the murder or disappearance of her mother in her early childhood. You said a year ago that perhaps soon she would have to explore that. Has she done it yet, or will she?
No, I think she will, because it was a murder-suicide. Both her parents, her father killed her mother and then killed himself. But the evidence for that is rather sketchy about whether he actually died in that case. And she has caught glimpses of people when she's doing different cases that she thinks, oh, there's my father, right? Or that. But we probably all experienced that, right? Where you're walking along somewhere and you think you see someone you know, and it turns out not to be. So she doesn't know how much she can trust that, but she is going to explore that at some point. However, right now, I have her in Istanbul, Turkey. And she's gone off for a much needed holiday with her friend Gab Rizzo wanted her to join her for a bit of a holiday. So Jorja has gone to Turkey and she arrives there, but Gab is missing. So that's the current story I'm writing. So
that's number 6?
Yeah, number 6. Right.
Was that an excuse to travel to Turkey?
Yeah, actually, I think I'm still suffering a bit from COVID lockdown. And I'd always wanted to travel to Turkey. I had a bunch of travel plans when COVID hit. And so when I started writing this book last year, I kind of thought, yeah, no, I'm just going to send Jorja overseas on holiday. And I think I'm sort of living vicariously through her at the moment.
Well, hopefully you don't have a missing friend.
Exactly.
Well, it's good to see her getting out of Calgary, but I think even in this one, she's going off to the Badlands. Did you get to visit some of your background, your geologist background, and explore the Badlands?
Yeah, I actually was born in Drumheller, although my family lived in a little town called East Cooley, a little mining town. So the fact that I was born in Drumheller was only because there was a hospital there, and there was no medical facilities in East Cooley. So yeah, so my very, very early childhood, I grew up in the Badlands area. And I did, before writing Night in the Museum, I did sort of do a day trip with a friend of mine, and we went exploring all my old haunts, and we went out to Rosebud and Bicycle and Drumheller and visited Horsepeak Canyon. And even though I'd been there before, you know, these places became some of the setting for Night in the Museum. And so it was just good to have that, you know, refresh in my mind, because it probably had been about 10 years since I had gone back there.
It's not the normal place that a case would take a PI. So without telling too much of the plot, could you tell us why Jorja has to go to the Badlands and Drumheller?
Yeah, so what ends up happening is, you know, this former cop who turned PI is dead, and George is investigating whether his death was actually an accident or not. The dead man's daughter doesn't believe it was an accident, which is what starts off the case. And but as she delves into this, she discovers that this PI, former cop, was investigating something that made him really excited. He was so excited about this case. He was talking hints about, finally being able to retire, and his daughter would never have money problems again. And so he was obviously working on something big. So as Georgia starts to investigate, it leads her to a very, very eccentric individual who lives out in that Badlands area. And he's built a sort of big eco compound on a place where he believes there's a spiritual portal into the other world. And this is the kind of guy he is. But he also has a small museum that he runs or owns in Rosebud. And he's inherited all these ancient pre-Columbian artifacts from his family, from his father and grandfather, who were actual archaeologists. So Georgia starts looking into this case and discovers that maybe this PI that has died was looking for some sort of ancient pre-Columbian artifact that's worth a lot of money. And that took her out to that area.
Oh, okay. For those, including myself, who've never been to the Badlands up there in Alberta, could you describe the setting? Is it just desert?
It's very, it's kind of like, the Grand Canyon is like Badlands on steroids, actually. So you're driving along, Alberta, and you've got the gentle rolling hills. It's very agricultural, kind of in that ranch land area. And then suddenly you'll come over a rise, and there is a canyon, that's been formed by erosion, through water and glacial runoffs. And so you come to this big canyon that's not even visible till you're sort of almost on top of it. And so as you move towards Drumheller, there are more and more of these canyons, and actually Drumheller is in one of these canyons. And so the Badlands are very, they're the side wall or the walls of these canyons are quite bare. There's very little vegetation, and you can see the stripes or the striations of the various sediments, but it's really just a wall of different colored banded rock, a lot of reddish rock, and of course, there's coal seams intermixed with that, which is why people settled there, way back in the early 1900s.
You just walk around and find dinosaur bones?
There have been people going into Horseshoe Canyon and discovering dinosaur bones there. Obviously, anything that's found now, should be turned in. The Terrell Museum is in Drumheller, and so many people have heard of that. It's got a huge collection of dinosaur bones that have been found in and around the area and also elsewhere. So it's pretty spectacular to see if you're ever tootling around Drumheller area.
Well, you mentioned the sixth book is taking place in Turkey, but I also know that on top of these novels and the novella that you sort of prequel novella you wrote, you also dabble in short stories. So, has there been any new short stories published or anything you're working on?
Not at the moment. I didn't write a short story this past year. I did have the honor of working with Crime Writers of Canada to help put together the Cool Canadian Crime Anthology. So that was a lot of fun. But between that and the new website and writing books and publishing it, I haven't written a short story, but this year might be the year I add another one.
Well, you wrote two. Did you write actually the two novels this year?
I'm kind of overlapping in years. So usually I publish two books within a 12-month period. So so I don't know if I can keep that up, Eric.
I don't know how you do it.
These it becomes a bit much. So usually I will start a new book. I publish in the fall in like October, and that's when my new book will come out. And then I typically start drafting the next one. And so that kind of rolls over into the next spring, and that goes off to the editor, and then I'm starting another one. And so that's kind of in my life.
Do you have sort of a long-term vision? Like, are you thinking 5 books ahead? Like, okay, now we're going to talk about the mom, or do you sort of take it as you go?
No, I kind of have an overarching idea of how I want this to go. And so I do have the next 3 books sort of already in mind. I guess something could happen that would change the order or my opinion on how it goes. But yeah, it's really odd when I'm about halfway through the book I'm writing, I suddenly go, oh, I want to write this book, and I have this idea, and then suddenly, that becomes, one of my, oh, I got to write this, So yeah, I have the next 3 sort of in mind, although they may come out in a different order than I'm currently thinking.
Oh, well, best of luck at keeping up that pace.
Thanks.
I hope you get that vacation you're looking for.
Yes, me too.
And I'm going to wish you also the best of luck for 3rd time's a charm and take home the prize this year.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
And thank you everyone for watching.